Hi, I'm Dan from a band called Bastille, and these are some films that I love. Saw Scream when I was like 10 or 11, and at the time I was just getting into being completely obsessed with films. And it's funny, it's referential. I think it brought a whole new, it kind of opened the door for a whole new wave of modern horror films. I think Wes Craven is somebody who is very respected in that world, and I think he's amazing. I think he's totally brilliant. I think it was a really brilliant, unexpected, sly, clever, kind of funny and scary, like modern horror film. You know, even looking to like the fact that they cast Drew Barrymore, who was by far the biggest name in the film, and killed her off in the opening scene. I think that in terms of like film marketing and horror marketing, I don't know if that's been done, you know, since Psycho as effectively as then. And obviously it was a bit of a nod to that, but it was, I don't know, I think it's brilliant. The Royal Tenenbaums was the first Wes Anderson film that I saw, and yeah, it's just brilliant. I mean, he's someone who, like a lot of the great kind of modern, I guess, auteurs who lean on the more kind of mainstream side, like him and Tarantino, I think they have such a kind of potent visual style, and I think his aesthetic and the tone of his films definitely rubs a lot of people up the wrong way, and I can see why it's quite divisive, but I guess you'd rather be pissing people off and really impressing people than like them not really caring at all. Yeah, Royal Tenenbaums is just a completely mad and brilliant tale of this very complex, far-reaching family, and it's, yeah, I think it's completely iconic and funny and sad and brilliant. And I think if you were to recommend a Wes Anderson film to someone who hasn't seen one before, I definitely would go for Royal Tenenbaums. Badlands, it's a sort of love story come road movie, crime drama, and for me, it's a film that is kind of referenced a lot, I think, within Hollywood and within film, and True Romance nods towards it in a lot of ways, and Natural Born Killers as well. It's that kind of, it's the sort of intense love story, doomed romance, when that gets twisted up with crime and the road movie. And it's Terrence Malick is an amazing visual director, and I remember seeing the film the first time and thinking it was incredible, and actually when we first started the band, we didn't have any money and we were doing everything ourselves, so I re-edited Badlands as a music video for one of our songs called Flaws, and it's a film that's really beautiful, and every frame looks like a kind of incredible photograph or composed image, but I thought it would be interesting to try and re-edit the story without any of the underlying darkness, and try and create something that felt positive and optimistic, which was surprisingly easy to do even with my non-existent editing skills. But yeah, so I guess it's a film that I love and I think is hugely respected, but also one that's kind of has a bit of a connection with us, even though that video doesn't exist anymore because it was highly illegal, much like a lot of the stuff that we did towards the beginning. I think 2001, yeah, maybe it's not the most sort of like narratively exciting film, but it's just, I think it was really important. I think it's set visually and stylistically, and in terms of like sort of pop culture's view of the future and of space, it was so huge in setting that, and I think it maybe came at a time where people, I think it's a film that, not from personal experience, but it is potentially more enjoyable if slightly inebriated, and maybe came at a time where that was a lot more acceptable, and that probably flips the experience a fair bit. In terms of favourite scenes, it's just, I'm gonna cop out and go for the really famous cut of the bone being thrown. The Shining. Oh man, what a film! It's yeah, like I sort of watched it, I think, by myself on Christmas night after everyone had gone to bed, which makes me sound like such a freak. But it was, it is just amazing. It's so unsettling, and it's such a brilliant adaptation. So many amazing performances, and it's just horrifying. It's kind of surreal and creepy, and in parts quite slow and iconic. Like, I think with a lot of these films, they have scenes that are just, it's kind of hard to divorce yourself now from how entrenched in sort of the popular consciousness these images and these scenes are, you know, from the creepiness of twins to the elevator opening and the blood pouring out to the little kid on a tricycle going through corridors. Like, these are scenes that have been parodied and parodied and parodied and referenced, and, you know, hacking through the door. Here's Johnny, the maze, the snow, you know, the sort of abandoned hotel, all these tropes that have become so kind of normalized, and yeah, I think it was just, it was amazing, and you know, an interesting film to read about. It sounds like it wasn't the most pleasant of shoots. You know, Kubrick was so amazing, but famously quite hard on a lot of his actors, and went to great lengths to get the performances that he wanted. And it sounds like it, yeah, wasn't like super fun on set, but the film is amazing, and yeah, I think it's still terrifying and totally unsettling, and I don't know what to say about it because it's really good. Yeah, I love Donnie Darko. I remember back in my like mega film geekery teenage years, like watching. I heard about this film, and the only way that you could see it was I had to get like a crack copy from America. It was like kind of pre everything being available online, and I remember just watching it, and I think it really speaks to like to teenagers, and it's like amazing use of music that was kind of felt nostalgic for a time that I wasn't really around for, but you know, it introduced me to a lot of Echo and the Bunnymen and like and a lot of Tears for Fears stuff, these bands that I hadn't really heard before, and you know, visually it's kind of really impressive. It's got this sort of like slightly dramatic teenage yearning thing going on, and it's just interesting, weird. It's kind of Lynchian in that, you know, some people could watch it and be like, well, that doesn't make sense, and yeah, I love that. This kind of odd, bizarre tone that it has, and I think it really spoke to me as a kid, and a lot of people, I think it did. Psycho is a Hitchcock-directed horror film that, again, is just sort of incredibly iconic, famous. It starts as a kind of petty crime love story drama that, I mean, it's hard to unknow what happens in the film because it's so iconic, but at the time it was marketed as this, you know, Hitchcock was really, really clever with his marketing of films, of like trying to draw you in and keep things surprising and unexpected. So you went and watched this incredibly famous actress having an affair, going off with some money, this kind of under brewing crime situation, and then she goes and stays in this motel, meets this slightly odd but nice guy that works there, and then is brutally murdered in the shower kind of about half an hour into the film. And that in itself, a bit like with Scream, I think was like was a big shock, having this big star murdered. It's very cleverly done for you know, for the time during which it was made, and there isn't any nudity, there isn't really any kind of actual violence, but it's so sinister and it's all implied. Seeing the kind of the blood go down the plug in the bath, and that shot that cuts between that and her eye, it's you know, it's horrifying and very, very creepy, and just really, really well done. Requiem for a Dream, I remember seeing I saw a clip of it, I think, on a plane, and was really captivated by Darren Aronofsky's editing and visual style, and I think yeah, and then I read the book by Hubert Selby Jr., which is, you know, just as happy as the film. It's devastating, but I think it really spoke to me when I was younger because of the fast-paced editing, you know, the use of so many different styles of like split screen and footage that have been sped up and slowed down, and all the different kind of editing styles and the surreal elements in it, and its darkness and its kind of humour in darkness. And I think Ellen Bernstein's like devastating and amazing performance, and it's sort of made me fall in love with Jennifer Connelly a little bit as well. I rewatched it recently, and I think it's potentially slightly more naive than I remembered it, because I think I was younger when I thought it was really brilliant. But you know, it's definitely, in terms of like stylized modern-ish cinema, I think it really grabbed me and captivated me, and I watched it way too many times, because I thought, because of a lot of the music in it, I mean, the score is incredible. Clint Mansell's score, played by the Kronos Quartet. It's so memorable, and it's so devastating, and it goes really far in kind of helping perpetuate the tension in the film. And I remember being really obsessed with that soundtrack, and we actually sampled it in our first mixtape. I always wanted to get those strings in somewhere. I think they also used the string line in a completely different context, in a like Lord of the Rings trailer. They epicked it up and made it. It was just, but like a very odd, different frame of reference to be thinking of like horrible drug descent and then orcs. It was a bit of a weird like contrast, but yeah. I guess Mulholland Drive is ostensibly a love story, an unlikely love story between two people in Los Angeles, and because it was originally intended to be a TV show, I think the first sort of hour or so of the film introduces a lot of people and a lot of scenarios, and then I think in typical Lynchian style, it sort of just goes in many directions. But I guess it's sort of about a love story in Hollywood between these two women, and the surrounding I guess chaos that ensues, to use an awful phrase. Well, I think one of the things that I loved so much about it when I first saw it was as a sort of young teenager, I became really obsessed with film and with reading about film and studying cinema and looking at different directors, and in a real geeky way. I think in the way that maybe when you're a kind of young teenager, you just obsess over stuff and you want to kind of read everything, or, you know, it's like some people have it about football. I happen to have it about weird cinema, and it started with horror films, and kind of I moved into David Lynch, and just sort of, I guess that film at the time was a new film, and so it was the only one I could see in the cinema. It was really exciting that he had a new film out, and it allowed me to go back through everything he'd done before, and that it left me wanting to leave and like chat. I saw it with my dad, and we, you know, which was really comfortable during certain scenes, but leaving the cinema, just, you know, kind of throwing ideas around and just wanted to talk about it for ages. And then I went home and went online and wanted to see what other people thought. And I don't know, to be really pretentious, I think like a lot of interesting art, no matter what genre or capacity it is, it's if it's thought-provoking and if it makes you want to go and think about it more and read about it more, that's really exciting and fun. And so I think that was my first kind of experience of that in a film that I got to see at the cinema. I think Baz Luhrmann is another one of those directors who regardless of whether or not you see him as like an auteur or not, he definitely has a very, very strong sense of like style and identity. And I think this is, if I was to watch one of his films, it would probably be this one, because it's so iconic again and of its own time. And I think for like a generation, kind of dragged Shakespeare into their lives a little bit, and it's sort of like, I think it like straddles the right line between like hysterical teenage hysteria and like heartthrobbery, and also doing something that's really creative and artistic, and definitely too much for some people. Like it's like a big sugar rush, but yeah, I think it's amazing. I think the like gospel elements of the soundtrack, along with like Radiohead and Garbage and all these different bands and artists, the supercuts and the kind of frenetic editing, and the like making Hawaiian shirts and guns a thing. I don't know. I think it's sort of it's a very entertaining watch, obviously.